Hey Little Things listeners, it's Jannah, exec producer here. This is actually part 2 of our chat with Lexi Rodgers, a writer, creative, athlete, and the subject of documentary series Hoops. If you haven't listened to part 1 of our Lexi chat yet, it's in the Little Things podcast feed right now. So go over there and listen, and then come trotting back over here for more from Lex.
Hi, Lexi.
Hello.
Now we're going to talk a bunch about resilience. So there are, in fact, Lexi, 3 secrets of resilient people, according to Dr. Lucy Hone, who is a renowned resilience expert. She has done a TED Talk that's been viewed 9 million times on YouTube around resilience. And she has had real experiences with like deep adversity and challenges. Like her daughter was run over and killed when she was 12, and she kind of used or tried to understand her grief and the steps that she could take to make her life manageable and keep going through her work as an expert and psychologist and psychiatrist, and a doctor. So she has 3 lessons that she has learnt from the people around her in studying this, and also from her own experiences. And I was a little bit shook because some of these things I definitely don't think that I have. And I wanted to chat with you and see if you think that you hit the 3 secrets of resilient people. Okay. Mm-hmm. Lesson 1, resilient people get that shit happens. They know that suffering is a part of life.
Yeah, I think so. Probably something that comes with facing different kinds of adversity.
Yeah.
For example, the first thing that springs to mind is probably losing a loved one, and experiencing grief when it's relating to death and a loss that is really difficult to reckon with. Like you can't bring anything back. Things happen that are irreversible, and yeah, it's out of your control. Do
you think you knew that before you had experienced the loss of a loved one, or that was a lesson that came from that experience?
I think I did in a bit less of a meaningful way. I probably had more of an attitude of shit happens.
Yeah.
And was just generally more cynical about the world being kind of shitty to people and there being struggles.
Yeah.
I was exposed to like quite serious mental health issues growing up. And so I did always have quite a strong sense of really, really sad and challenging things happen to people for no particular reason, or they happen to people for a particular reason that is equally as sad and inexplicable. And so it probably manifested itself more as like quite a cynical, sometimes you just can't help things that are shitty that happen, and that sucks. And the bottom line of it all would be like, that sucks, life sucks. But I think after having someone die that you're really close with and who is your best friend, you really work through a lot of those feelings of grief and mourning and shitty things happening, and you also find the positive side to it and the beauty in it and the ways that cope that aren't just sitting in this is shit. So it was probably something that just forced me to move beyond that quite cynical viewpoint.
Yeah. I'm going to pivot to Oprah. I wonder your thoughts on this as like an extension of this topic. Obviously, there's a whole vast conversation about everything happening for a reason. And Oprah has weighed in, and she said, everything is showing up so that you can be more of who you were meant to be. What are your thoughts on experiencing really difficult, tough things and them happening to show you or to help be part of your journey? Agree, disagree, hate it, love it?
I think I agree, and I agree with the kind of framing of it in a way that's understandable and trying to turn it into a positive. I think the thing that becomes toxic
Yeah.
and where toxic positivity starts coming into it is when it is a doctrine for how you live, and it becomes like this overwhelming kind of wayfinder almost as to how you're going to respond to things. So having like, yeah, everything happens for a reason, and that reason is to give me an opportunity to self-improve.
Yeah. Go away.
Yeah, I just think that's kind of like, that's a hell of an expectation to place on yourself.
Yeah.
And it's okay to have, it's kind of the same thing with like affirmations.
Yeah.
Where affirmations are important and they're shown to work. But if you don't feel totally convinced by it all the time, that's not going to take away from the positive impact that they may be having anyway. You just need to have whatever comfort level you need to have, a perspective as to, or find the balance that you're comfortable with shitty things happening and them being opportunities, which I don't view shitty things happening as opportunities when they happen to me. I view them as, this
Shitty.
is shit
Yeah.
and I feel terrible. But in the process of coping with them, and not necessarily consciously, I can reflect on those shitty things and say, I learned this about myself and I learned that about myself. It's not necessarily a call to action to try and justify why you need to be self-developing or bringing positivity out of a situation that's shit. If that's a way that people feel helps them cope, fantastic. But I think turning it into the thing that is guiding your every action is potentially not being honest with yourself and open with how you might actually respond as an individual.
And I also think it's then saying that everything happens for a reason. This awful thing was justified because it took me here. Then, I don't know, it feels super self-centered and stuff too, and feels quite like I don't want to justify awful things.
Yeah, sometimes, and that's where, like, I think at a surface level, I don't think I'm a cynical, like I'm quite a hopeful person. I am quite a hopeful person and optimistic, but on a surface level, I can come across quite cynical. And when it comes to the like, yeah, oh yeah, everything happens for a reason thing, is like, I don't know if my mum getting cancer and dying happened for a reason. It just happened. And it's one of the sad facts of life that things like that happen. I don't need there to be a reason for that to happen. And I certainly don't need that reason to be rooted in me and what I can do to better myself. It's a much bigger world than that. And the things that you can take from those experiences that are outside of you are important, but they're not they're not justifying the shitty things happening. It's just, that's just a part of life.
Lesson 2. Resilient people focus on things they can change and not the things they can't. And then she had this quote, which I do actually like. Don't lose what you have to what you lost.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. I think the change thing is a funny one, because focusing on the things you can change and the things you can't is probably something that I didn't have prior to the basketball experience, simply because when you're faced with a policy ruling or a decision that's coming from people that you can't control, that is then dictating your life and how you go about things, I don't think I ever felt like I had a choice as to whether I could like focus on what I can and can't change.
Yeah.
I had to focus on what I could change. And in going through that in quite a extreme and pressured environment, probably helped me get to a point where I realized that I can take that attitude with a lot of other things, which is positive, which is really positive. But at the same time, sometimes it's okay to just turn your back to things, or with the knowledge that you may or may not come back to them as well.
It's like you might be able to change XYZ circumstance, or you might not, but it's whether you want to, whether you have the will to, I guess, too.
Yeah, and it's really easy to like sit and talk about it when a bad thing happens. that principally, and as a way of trying to conceptualize this, we talk about how you respond and whether you can or can't change things. But in the moment, and when we're faced with this adversity, it's deeply, deeply personal. It probably is unseen, and it's not an expression of this philosophy. It's something that you learn and feel comfortable with in yourself, and depending on who you are as a person is how you will learn and feel comfortable with how you respond in those situations. So yeah, I think it's still, I can see, like, I agree with her. I think that reframing things into the can and can't change buckets is a really useful tool that might show a lot of resilience, and show resilience in a moving on sense especially. But I'm not sure that sort of spending time on the things that you can't change and perhaps just moving on without having to affect positive change to those bad things, that's also completely fine. And I think there's a resilience in that as well. But I think as a overall, yeah, focusing on what you can change is a really nice way to even process the bad thing and potentially move on.
Just to say as well, like, some people are, so research shows that some people are born with more quote unquote like innate resilience, but resilience is a muscle that you can learn and grow and develop over time. So it's kind of hard. Like, we're not all starting from the same block, and we're not all starting from the same block in terms of systemic issues, like injustices, all these things. So much of like, when I was doing the research for this episode, I was like, it's so based on like a white, straight, cis kind of like psyche, a lot of this self-improvement like doctrine. And that's why I was curious to get your point of view as well. And there's something here around the locus of control, which I think is like a really good example of some of this stuff. Basically, it's the concept of, do you happen to the world or does the world happen to you? And, you know, like, you make your own, like, all those kinds of like very baseline, not very reflective of the world around us kind of like self-improvement doctrine. Yeah. That I find I'm really keen to like get your thoughts on.
Yeah, I think, yeah, when in the question of, do you happen to the world or does the world happen to you? My immediate response is probably one that is born out of my experience as a transgender person. And I think as a young man, and being quite a successful athlete, being quite successful in a masculine culture such as performance sports, I can conclusively say that I happened to the world, or I felt as though I happened to the world when I was an older teenager and then a young man. And my sense of ego was huge, really inflated. And I'm not sure if that was, whether it was conditioned a certain way or whether that experience is a general experience. I can only speak to how I felt about that. But upon transitioning and learning and facing a lot of the adversity that comes with being a transgender woman, which I was incredibly naive and oblivious to as a straight white man, it does feel as though the world happens to you more so. Even when I'm deliberately taking action and doing something with a lot of passion, it feels as though I'm trying to justify it to the world around me or find its place in the world around me, as opposed to placing it rightfully where it belongs, because, you know, the world should see my thing or my thoughts or my feelings. So personally, I have a really gendered experience of that. And that has just come from who I was growing up and then who I was as an adult and who I was when I transitioned. I think in a more general sense, like in an everyday sense though, oscillating between happening to the world or world happening at you is probably not a horrible way to think about things. It's okay to feel like when you feel confident and when you feel empowered, happening to the world can be a really great way to express yourself and could be a really great way to kind of get over the barriers that we might place in front of us if we are too focused on the world happening to us.
It's hard to hold all these different truths together at once with some of these conversations as well, because it's like, even though the world, your experience is that the world is often happening to you, and the experience that you've had in doing your documentary, in basketball, the world has all these external forces has happened to you, but then you've actively made choices.
Yeah, and there's and there's a difference
in
as well.
spite of that.
I mean, when these bad things have happened and when it's been at the hand of other people's decision making, it calls to question how, like, the nature of victimhood and how I may have felt as a victim of these things. And I'm not saying that I'm a victim, woe is me. More so that feeling on the wrong end of something that has an alternative probably innately gives you that sense of, this is happening to me. Someone is making this decision about me, and there is nothing I can do to control it. That said, there's a lot of power and there's a lot of pride that I hold in being strong enough to happen to basketball. So I'm making the choice to pursue this as a career, and it may not necessarily sit well with a lot of people at the time, but I'm still happening and I'm still pursuing it. So is it a matter of perspective? Is it about being the victim as opposed to being the advocate? I mean, both are existing at the same time. But yeah, it's fascinating to think about it as a way of framing action and a way of coping with adversity as well. I think when it becomes a greater thing too, for example, when it's something that feels a bit more profound and existential, for example, a death, then it feels impossible that it's not the world happening to you.
Yeah.
And that's actually really humbling. And that can be really grounding and really pull you back from a sense of ego that may be toxic. And it may be toxic in a positive sense, or it may be toxic in a negative sense. And again, like I said, like when I was a young man, I felt as though I happened to the world, and I probably had quite an ignorant sense of, I'm in control of my actions and my actions do this and that and this and that. But if and when that was the case, it also meant that I was in control of feeling gender dysphoria and feeling the weight of an expectation in male environments that I did not feel comfortable in. And so passing judgment on that inability when it happens, and when it's something that's deeply personal like that, that can have quite a harmful effect. And that's where a sense of shame can become really toxic and self-fulfilling. So I think it is a balance. And I think, like you said earlier, like when things are sort of framed from a cisgendered, white, like from these points of view that have a bit more privilege, it's easy to conceptualize them as these really positive spaces. Yeah. But there's also a lot of parts of the world that we do not have control over. And sometimes who you are as a person is something you don't necessarily have control over, or that you haven't quite learned yet. So if we lock ourselves into these kind of ways of reacting to the world and ways of approaching the world, I wouldn't want to, you wouldn't want to sort of actively be undermining something that you hadn't quite learned about yourself yet. Yeah.
It's the idea of making your own luck and seizing the day is not possible for everyone. And it's also a very exhausting way, like waking up every day and being like, I'm going to seize this day. Even the word seize is quite intense.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a little colonial.
Yeah, truly.
Yeah, and I think
it's mine to take. I'm going to do it.
When I'm critical and talking about the balance and things like that, and when it can be negative and when it can be harmful, that's in quite a deep and personal context. Yeah, I think as a kind of mantra in a day-to-day sense, like an affirmation might be, like talking yourself into action and talking yourself into challenging yourself is positive and can be really positive. It's just being aware of when that might be getting to a point where it's actually compromising something. Or
I think that's the thing, is like, it's all these subjects that we, and all these tropes and concepts that we all ingest and be like, okay, this is how I'm going to move through the world, leave out any kind of room for deeper discussion or complexity that's really important, and that can stop people from doing this. So all these like well-meaning mantras are very exclusive and also unhelpful and not realistic to how like our brains work and the experiences we all live. And that's why I get so like frustrated by it, and why I find it an interesting topic.
Yeah, and like we live in a world where well-meaning mantras and doctrines and methodologies of how we want to go about life in very small and watchable videos.
Yes.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And the format tickles something in our little goblin brains. And you just have, they're just like, there is a lot more nuance to a lot of these things, but the world we live in isn't particularly sensitive to that nuance these days.
Yeah. And I think as well, we like the idea that we can control our own happiness, and we like the idea of being like, we can change this thing, and sometimes you actually can't change all these things.
Yeah, and sometimes relinquishing that sense of control. I think at the moment, for example, I am not online that much, and that's a response to the documentary coming out and feeling a bit of a need to self-preserve. I don't need to see comment sections. I don't need to see message requests. I've seen those things in the past, and there's no positivity that comes out of that for me. So I'm not on my phone as much. And for half the day, my phone's on grayscale.
What's grayscale?
It's taking off the color.
Oh.
So my phone's in black and white.
Oh my God. Wait, why?
Because it makes it less appealing.
Really? So it's like to stop you picking up your phone. I'm trying
to remember where I picked it up.
That is such a good life
online,
hack. Yeah, exactly. In a TikTok video.
Yeah, in beautiful, appealing color. No, but I have found it to be really effective.
Really?
Especially on social media, where all of the colors and all of the funny shapes and silly things are like really appealing. Taking the color away from it, it makes it.
It's like, what am I doing?
Takes a lot of the life out of it. I don't know. But yeah, so taking myself out of the situation and not trying to wrestle with the control about my image online or about how I'm being perceived online. I mean, we're talking about the internet here. Like, it's actually quite a safe place to relinquish that control, or just to acknowledge that there's nothing you can do to a certain degree. And so it's more important to focus on the things that you can control, which would be speaking or writing about parts of the experience that I think could be heard and should be visible and should be represented. And hopefully that has an impact.
It's so frustrating to feel, and like I would only feel, I'm speaking of my own experiences that are obviously very different to yours. It's frustrating to feel misunderstood. And I feel like maybe that's something that you can resonate with in terms of how people project onto you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously from the basketball, like the transgender athlete angle, almost everyone is projecting something onto me that is just not representative of who I am. But even in being a transgender woman, that's what a lot of the experience is sometimes. And there are a lot of people who will unintentionally treat you a certain way that it's quite palpable. And there's a lot of people who will treat you a certain way that is very palpable. And sometimes that can be overcompensation. Sometimes that can be outright discrimination. But yeah, it's something that I probably still have a long way to go in terms of trying to have a bit more like pride or a bit more of a a sense of self that I want to actually actively express. Like for now, I find a lot of comfort in just accepting that people are going to misrepresent me and people are going to have an idea of me that is wrong. And that's not something that I need to change. It's not something that I feel necessarily empowered to change. But it would be nice if there was more open-mindedness in terms of what a transgender athlete is or what a transgender woman is. Because the reality is, like, that's not a pillar of my identity and who I am. I'm not, I don't wake up and go, yeah, Lexi Rodgers, transgender athlete or transgender woman. Like, no. I'm just who I am. There's a hell of a lot more to us than the things that make us different. And that's where self-expression and open-mindedness can create an environment to become comfortable with that and to learn about that. And that goes, like, it doesn't even need to be a transgender thing. I mean, there's a whole host of norms and comfortable expectations that we have day to day with everyone, including people who fit really neatly into this world that we've created. And sometimes I think that really undermines individuality and how we connect with people person to person. So yeah, it's something I think everyone has to reckon with, whether they're being misrepresented or not. And everyone, even in like more casual settings, like, oh, I wonder what they thought of me, or I wonder if I made a good first impression. These things exist on a scale that can be quite normal and can be quite everyday and forgettable and can be quite impactful and harmful.
So do you want to hear the third secret?
Yeah.
Okay. Resilient people ask themselves, is what I'm doing helping or harming me? They check in with their behavior and what's going on regularly.
Yeah. I mean, I do that. Like, I'm a self-critical person for sure. The interesting thing is, like, I can acknowledge that there are a lot of things I'm doing that maybe aren't helping me, but I continue to do them.
I know, it's so true. It's like, is what I'm doing helping or harming me? Harming me. Let's do more.
Yeah. Like, I'm 3 pints deep. I've got work tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
I'm still going to have another 3 pints.
Yeah.
like, let's send it. Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that the lack of a response isn't included in that.
Yeah.
But it's certainly, I would say, I'm someone who reflects, I think, a little bit too much on whether what I'm doing is right or wrong, and also the standard to which I'm doing those things is probably a little bit extreme. And funnily enough, that's something that's come more with womanhood and being a woman.
Wow.
Is reflecting a lot more on the quality of my work and reflecting a lot more on my image and how I'm represented. And again, that probably comes back to this sense of the world is happening to me, so I need to have the world react to me.
That is really interesting that your mindset has actively shifted.
There's a lot of things that change, sometimes quite quickly and drastically, sometimes over a long period of time. I really enjoy talking and writing about these things. And I'll always qualify all of these things with this is my experience and this is how I've experienced these things. But yeah, I mean, you could take something that's quite apparent, like the beauty industry, and what sort of things women face and reckon with consciously and subconsciously in response to the beauty industry, and how we hold women's appearances to a different standard to men's. That's something that obviously shifts when I engage with my femininity and who I am as a woman. I mean, the funny thing about gender is it's an expression. So I can acknowledge all the toxic parts that are in and around femininity, for example, the beauty industry at times. And yet the expression of those things is still inherently feminine a lot of the time. And so I'm drawn to them. And I guess that comes back as well to, like, you know, reflecting on these things and if they're good or bad for you. There's a lot of things I do engage with that I find incredibly affirming that may not necessarily be good for me. But in the world that we live in, it brings me a sense of self and a sense of comfort at the same time. But yeah, I think overall, like, self-awareness is something that I think about a lot and think about more now that I'm not. I mean, part of it's probably age too. Like, as a young man who was really good at sports and then went and studied and did a double degree and was all filled with piss and vinegar and got a job as a young professional, and, you know, like I kind of was just ignorantly, the world is my oyster.
Yes.
I don't think that was, there is a lot of things that I don't think are inherently gendered about that kind of approach and that kind of mindset.
I do think, like, I didn't realize that as I got older, I would probably become less confident versus more.
I've had the same experience. Yeah. I think it's just being self-critical is, it's a double-edged sword, because I wouldn't have, let's say when I was making a lot of music, and I was doing this when I was younger, most of this stuff is unlistenable dreck.
You're going to have to play it for us in a little
bit. Oh my gosh. And I almost admire that it's unlistenable dreck that I felt confident and emboldened to put out there without question. It's a product that I think could have been a hell of a lot better. And if I was going to undertake something like that now, I'd probably stew on it and never put it out. Like, is perfectionism something that comes with being more self-critical as we get older? There are other parts of my life where I do feel more confident. I mean, I haven't been publishing writing for the longest time because I didn't think I had a voice or a kind of confidence with how I wanted to articulate things that I felt comfortable putting out there. Whereas now I've never felt more confident about being able to write and publish and speak on a lot of these things. So yeah, it's funny how things shift back and forth. And it's funny how, like, the creative side of it and the self-expression side of it has probably regressed into a more critical point of view. And I wonder if that's like growing out of the closeness to childhood and imagination and, you know, having the shitty things of the world sort of pile up over the years and becoming a bit more grounded with that. I haven't thought that much and I haven't reflected that deeply about whether that is the case, but...
What do they say? Once bitten, twice shy.
Well, exactly.
Yeah. Might be a bit of us. When I was looking at all these different concepts and speaking about resilience, I'm like, it's so layered and it's so subjective, and it's also, all of these self-care trends are born from a specific experience. And oftentimes that experience is cis and straight and white and privileged and born from those places. So how do these self-care trends and how do these conversations around self-improvement or self-belief or self-expression make sense to anyone who exists outside of these barriers? And that's what's been really interesting to try and understand, like, what you take away from it, what I take away from it, and like what's helpful and what's just bullshit.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of the intersections that either showcase some of the negative and toxic sides to it, but also showcase some of the value to it. Like, it's a point of difference. And that's the funny thing with diversity, is it can be really valuable to bounce different ideas wherever they're born from to see whether they can be turned into something more positive or more negative, or if they're having negative impacts on people or positive impacts on people. Self-care is a really interesting topic in that sense. And self-development too, because it's inherently personal, and yet it's now something that we share and we at times advertise to the people around us. So yeah, it's fascinating, but it's been great to sit and chat about it.
Really quickly, do you have one, like, if you're going to give anyone a quick tip on building resilience, do you have something that comes to mind after everything we've just said about how layered it is?
Oh my God. Develop the habit of forgiving yourself for feeling certain ways. So in a more common way of saying it, like, be comfortable being kind to yourself, even if you're not feeling the need to be, especially if you're in dark times and experiencing dark emotions. Give yourself the space to feel them and try to develop that feeling of acceptance, probably would be the biggest thing. A lot of the things will pass, and time is a really valuable tool in terms of healing beyond that adversity.
Here you are 1 year later from your documentary.
Yeah. Having grown out the bangs of the last chapter.
Yeah, it's looking good.
It's been a nightmare, to be honest.
Oh, well, it looks good. And we're resilient with our hair. We're resilient with all the hair mistakes we've made along the way.
Even before this, when you were like, yeah, all the tattoos in the documentary is like, on one of the first watches too, it was like, my legs are a lot more filled with tattoos, and I've had about 5 hairstyles in this span
Yeah, I know.
of
I'm
6
terrible.
months or a year. Yeah.
It's all part of the process, except
Yeah.
your journey. Oh, well, thank you, Lexi. This episode of Little Things was executive produced by Alice Griffin, that's me, and Jannah Anderson, and produced by Natasha Lau.